Thank you.
I
Great, thank you.
Yeah, doing good.
Thank you. I Who do you want to start with? Okay, well, I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, so I was very lucky to be exposed to a lot of theater from the very beginning. And I was one of those kids who would put on a show of the 12 Days of Christmas for my parents' captive holiday guests. So I was that kid, and then I just always wanted to be in the theater, and I was an actor. I am an actor. But I have been making my living against all odds in the entertainment industry since for my entire adult life. So I started, like I said, I was started out as an actor, and then like a lot of actors of color, especially that I know, began writing when I realized I wasn't seeing stories about people who look like me on the stage and in film and television. So but it's been an incredible journey and something I can't imagine not being a part of my life. Right.
I think that storytelling was always an important part of just like my expression and like becoming a person. And I actually started undergrad as a painting major, and I realized at some point when I was, in a studio, until 3 in the morning, like by myself, like I was just painting people's faces, and I had a moment of realization that I like was missing actual connection in my expression, and so I transitioned into the theater, and actually dramaturgy was really where I found my sort of grip on the art form, and through engaging with looking at stories and looking how they were put together, I think that that sort of process of analyzing and researching and looking, I put that back into wanting to do something generative and do something expressive. And my history with painting and dance and music, I just started to manifest in writing, and just never stopped, I guess.
Alrighty. So, what I find the most fascinating about all of the journeys, especially for artists who have been working for a significant amount of time, is we always start as one thing and we realize, no, theater is such a collaborative art that you can wear 80,000 different hats and you're going to be just fine. You're going to realize, wow, I like to dance and paint, but also there's no one out here doing the things I do. So I'm going to add more hats so that someone can pave the way for more individuals who look like me, who dance like me, who want to be multifaceted like me. So thank you both for having these beautiful intersections of creativity. And I think it shows in your writing as well, that understanding of multifacetedness and how complicated human beings can be. Which brings us to my favorite part of the show, when the playwrights get to talk about what they've written. Frozen Fluid, Adventures of a Fox Designer Handbag. I internally stress out about it every time. Like, a lot of words, I'm gonna get it out. But both of them are so different just in their content matter, but I love them in the similarity that neither of you prescribe to the traditional like unity of time, space, all those like old school drama rules that we were kind of trained to be very disciplined in. You kind of threw them out the window. So if I could have just kind of insight into what your process was like in how you shaped the story and then how you got it on the page.
Yeah, I'll go.
We'll start with Fly.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's so funny that you bring up, like the Aristotle and, the poetics and all this stuff. It's like, I actually really like all of that in terms of like the well-made play and rules and things like that. It's sort of like listening to a symphony and then like, how it's going to resolve. And there's something like nice in its execution. So I always think it's really funny that I like plays like that. And then what I write is just the complete opposite. But I think for me, and the play is about the deconstruction of identity and gender, and in this sort of like mythic landscape that's not familiar to us, but it should be, and inside of, a reversal and mashup of all of these biblical stories. To me, it felt like the dramaturgy and structure of the play was more about like a drone or a fugue, or like the really slow process of a glacier melting and then suddenly like a huge chunk breaks off and goes into the ocean, right? And so finding structures that, structures or scenic progressions or like narrative progressions that were more in line with the sort of internal world and the way that the world is collapsing on itself. And it just, I think that there's a version of the play that could be more like this happened and then this happened and this happened. But I don't find that is the way that I experience memory. I don't find that's the way that I experience the way that my identity and the expression of my identity continues to evolve. It's always sort of oscillating back and forth between now and past events and, speculative about the future, right? So I think that to me, I don't know that it was necessarily ever like an intentional choice of being like, I'm going to write this weirdo play, but it just kind of how it happened. Yeah.
And if you wouldn't mind providing for our audience just a small synopsis or teaser so that they know what we're talking about.
Yeah, probably should have started with that. So the play is called Frozen Fluid, and the subtitle is, an Antarctic gender nonconforming creation myth. Three trans and gender nonconforming scientists are doing research on Antarctica. And they're the only people on the entire span of the continent, and they're basically the world is ending. The whales are dying, the phytoplankton is dying, the glaciers are melting, and as they are there trying to grapple with the sort of like end of the world, their past and their memories and their the construction of their and realization of their gender identities start to kind of fold in on one another. And it's sort of a exploration of non-binary gender fluidity inside of a world of science and whales and cats. So
Perfect. Thank you. I was like, oh, we're talking so much about the show. I just want people to know, oh, like, here's just a little bit, a little
Yep.
teaser. Perfect. Thank you. And for Christine, what was it like for Adventures of a Faux Designer Handbag?
Well, um, so I actually quite love the well-made play as well, and I also tend to write cinematically, um, and a lot of magical realism, sort of what comes into my head, and like Fly, I don't set out to do that. It just happens. You hear the characters talking, and all of a sudden they're going off somewhere into to another plane or spatial location, and then you just follow them there. That's what's happened. So Adventures of a Faux Designer Handbag is about these three friends who need to find a replacement for this very specific designer handbag, and they don't have time to get it, so they go to Chinatown to try to buy one and get catapulted into through space and time to a theme park in Orlando called Splendid China, which actually used to exist. And there they meet a couple of people who help them sort of find out that authenticity is perhaps in the eye of the beholder. So it's a lot about identity and authenticity and assumptions, and um, a lot of complicated feelings that I have had about the country of my ancestors, which is China. Although I have only visited very briefly in my life. I'm sixth generation Asian American on my mother's side, second generation on my father's side. So anyway, I guess that's like all I can say is that I had this idea. I have been to Chinatown, to those kind of sketchy street corners where someone says, "Hey, you want Chanel? Come here." And then you go with them and you think, what have I done? I may never emerge alive, And so I just had this funny idea about what would happen if you did go down these stairs into this room and then you ended up somewhere crazy. And then I read about this theme. I had actually driven by this large pagoda structure, an entrance in Orlando once, and I thought, what is that? And I researched that and found out there used to be a theme park that was sort of like Epcot, only all China all the time. So they had terracotta soldiers, and they had noodle pulling, and all this stuff. I never went because it closed. It only lasted, I think it lasted 10 years. I think I read. But anyway, that's where my brain took me, and I went with it.
Christine hit on this a little bit earlier, but I love listening to people talk about their work because then you find even more intersectionality between everyone's plays. Both of you wrote with representation in mind, of wanting to see individuals like yourselves or people that you know and love be on stage. Could you, either of you, speak a little bit more about what representation means to you and how these pieces specifically are contributing to that?
Yeah, so Frozen Fluid is three characters who are all TG&C. Tay, the main character, goes by they, them, and then there's Herman and Tara. And I'm so excited for Occupy because it's only the second reading of Frozen Fluid. It's still a really, really new play for me. It's the first time that it has an all TG&C creative team and cast. And just sitting in rehearsal with Padra and Eitan and Elle and Logan and Everly, it's just so incredible to be not only have a space for all of us to be making work together, it's really affirming and special for me to be able to connect with them on this level, because I think that so much of, especially now, but and everything, right? But I think that for a lot of TGNC people, there is a lot of isolation, a lot of disconnection, and not just in the world, but then also just in finding and hearing and seeing stories that are about their lived experiences. And so it's really special for me to, hear the group, working through the scenes and talking about the story and what's going on with these characters and relating it to their own lives. And it's really powerful just to make that connection with people through a story that was like really personal to me in terms of how it came about, and how it references my experience. So yeah, I think it's really incredible, and it's like really a gift to be able to get that from the group. So yeah, it's gone really great.
Can't wait to see it. I think, oh boy, it's a complicated time we're in. I feel like we as storytellers are especially intent on making sure we are being heard and writing ourselves into the narrative, because there are so many systems in place that have tried to tell us what our stories should be or not hear them at all. I think I keep coming back to this thing I heard at the beginning of the summer about history. This is not a new statement, but something I just recently heard. History is remembered by the stories that we tell. And so we have that responsibility, to make sure that history is reflecting our stories. As an actor, I have really seen so many. Representation has gotten better in theater, film, and television since I began back in the 1800s. But the experience of we are very often portrayed as the perpetual foreigner, and even with the best intentions in mind, I have found that there are very few stories out there that have centered the Asian American experience of someone who is, grew up here just like me and is struggling. It's a sort of a lifelong struggle for all of us, I think, to find where we belong, and that's why we write about that a lot. But so I have found that it's very important to me to tell those kinds of stories and have those kinds of characters. And it's really only been recently that I have had a new understanding of how important it is for us to be stalwart in telling those stories and making sure they're heard. Because I think that a lot of us who are otherized, and I feel like it's more, maybe it's just all the people I know, but I feel like it's more people than is anywhere near right. It's just not right. But I feel like we have internalized a lot of the rejection of our authentic stories. And we have sort of accepted that maybe either they're not worth telling, just not true, or they're not, whether it's a craft issue or something. So we keep studying and we keep working and we keep pouring ourselves into making the play better and better. But then I think what happens a lot is we internalize that into thinking, instead of saying, oh, actually, perhaps it could be that the person, the gatekeeper who's judging my work, cannot center themselves in that work. So therefore, it doesn't resonate with them, and therefore they judge it as not worthy. And understanding that has been so important to me this summer, to say, wait a minute, let me ask myself, really, do I feel like my story is worth telling? Yes, I do. And is the craft where it needs to be? I'm always working. We're always working. We're always improving. And so hopefully the answer is yes to that too. And then where do you go from there? You don't let other people, you don't wait for permission to tell your story. Sorry, there's a very long answer. I can talk about that for a long time.
I'm jive with all of it.
I was about to say, I loved every minute of it, so please don't apologize. One of the notions, I'm going to call it a notion, that I have been kind of trying to propel in my life and in others' lives is exactly what you're talking about, Christine. This idea of the canon being this pedestal works that we all have to honor and we all have to be familiar with in order to be competent theater makers. And I kind of challenge that and ask, what does Chekhov know about my life experiences? What does Eugene O'Neill write about that expresses what I'm going through, what my family's going through? They don't. And a lot of times the only people who can tell your story is you, because there's nobody else out here doing it yet. And it's really sad to say. And a lot of these playwrights who are doing remarkable work, like these two lovely individuals, they don't always get the platform that they need or the outreach that they need to become the next Eugene O'Neill, to become the next Chekhov, or insert any other like famous playwright, Ibsen, whatever. Like, which is why I love Occupy the Stage, because it gives first-time playwrights, unknown playwrights, unpublished playwrights the opportunity and the validation that they need to continue their work. That's so important to me, and I know it's important to Women's Theater Festival as well. So I just want to say yes to both what Fly and Christine said. Yes, all around. But that does bring...
Sorry, may I just piggyback on that a little bit, because I want to say yes, and there's no denying that the works of Eugene O'Neill and Anton Chekhov and so many other of the people who have been in the canon are masterpieces. And I think that there is a double standard for what is a universal story. And so I think, we've grown up to accept that a universal story centers white cisgender people. I mean, that's, and we've accepted that. And so, but the idea that Fly's story can't be universal or my story can't be universal, it doesn't really hold any water. There's been no interrogation of the truth in that, and just looking at the humanity that is at the center, really.
Yeah, I hearing Christine talk, I'm reminded of one of my very dear mentors, Dr. Jessica Mertz, who is a brilliant expert on Shakespeare, also like really pounded historiography into my education. And she said, every day is an opportunity for a play to become a part of the canon 100 years from now, because a canon is built, it's made by us, right? So I think something like Occupy, looking at the plays that are now, looking at the people who are making work now, this is the kind of platform that creates that infrastructure that 100 years from now, these are the stories that, people are going to be looking back at.
Which is a beautiful segue to our next question. Thank you, Fly.
You're welcome.
Why these plays now? With so you submitted them to Occupy. That's it. That's the end of the question. Why these plays now?
Fly, do you want to start?
You go.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I wrote this play a while ago. It seems like I keep referring to it as the honeymoon years of the first Obama administration. So I had written a couple of plays in 2010, 11, 12, that people just did not really respond to much. But I wanted to take a look at them again this summer during the pandemic, and found that this play and Empress May Lee Lotus Blossom, which we did a part of in the Fringe Festival for Women's Theater Festival in July, they both actually said a lot of what I wanted to say right now, and were being received in a whole different way. And so whether it's because of the conversations that have been cracked open since the murder of George Floyd, and all of the national reckoning, systemic racism, and that in the country and in our industry, I don't know. But so I have taken this play out. I was thinking about, I did write a radio play version of it, because I think a lot of us are looking at the different ways to get our stories out there. And one of the reasons I will go forward with it at some point, but one of the reasons I didn't want to concentrate on it right now is because it was very important to me to see the Asian American faces of the characters and the actors. And so when I read about, first of all, I think Johanna Maynard, Edwards, and Rowan Haig, they're amazing women and people. And I just believe in them so much. And so anytime I see they're doing something, I want to show up and be a part of it. So that is another very long answer of saying, I saw this play speaks to me. I haven't heard it actually in a number of years. And I did some rewrites of it. And it's funny because I took it out of the drawer, kind of like went, shake it out, and then I was like, wait, I really like this play. It's so weird. And I really like it. So I'm excited to hear it because it speaks to a lot of things that are just underlined for me right now. Issues of, just being what it is to be American and what it is to be Asian American. And so that's why I'm excited to hear it.
That's such a beautiful answer. How about Fly? Why is Frozen Fluid happening right now?
Yeah. I similar to Christine, I also started writing this play 2017. So I've been working on this piece for a while, and I sort of, I've put it away for a while and take it out and shake it off. I love that, Christine. Get all the dust off of that, right? Yeah, I started when I was in the middle of my grad program, and it was just after the time that I had started to identify as TGNC. And so it really began, I think, in that vein of also an exploration of this sort of like next chapter of my life. And then I put it away for a while, and then I graduated, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? So I got that play back out, and really have been working on it intensely over the last year, and just started to really get some momentum with the writing and making connections with people, about this play specifically. And so for me, it's become sort of a way to, especially in the isolation of the pandemic, to ride out into the world with this story and find other people like me who want play, right? And I think actually I found out about Occupy through the TGNC and Theater Facebook group, which has been, again, during the pandemic, and then even prior to that, an amazing community for connection of TGNC theater artists of all multifaceted hats, right? Finding ways to connect with each other, especially for folks like myself who in Nebraska are maybe not housed in an incredibly diverse or inclusive community all the time. And And so, yeah, so it's been, again, in this time of really wanting to connect and find other people who are like you and resonate with the kind of stories that, touch us in an intimate, personal way. It just made a lot of sense to me to continue riding that wave of this play over to North Carolina, and we're having a grand old time.
So you mentioned being in Nebraska. Well, first off, beautiful answer to you also. I just love hearing both of you speak so much, so I feel really guilty when I have to interrupt. But you mentioned being in Nebraska. Christine, where are you calling from?
I'm in New York City. I hope you cannot hear the construction that just started upstairs. Can you hear it?
No.
Okay, good, great.
And so we have one Nebraska, we have one New York City. I am located on the North Carolina coast. Will not disclose any further than that. But three very different locations, and yet we're all here having a good old chat in the virtual universe. I use this question as a segue to how has adapting your work and your theater making process to online, what's that like as a writer, and then what is that like as a theater maker?
Yeah, I'll go. So I took Rowan's virtual directing workshop, and also Key OBS is just totally rad, right? That's a game changer on my end. But so Rowan articulated something that I have been thinking about, which is the difference between, virtual theater and venue-based theater. And that sort of phrase of venue-based really struck me because when Padra, the director of Frozen Fluid for Occupy, and I were going through the script the first time to sort of decide, how we were going to approach everything, and then looking at, of course, the caption. The captioning, which is just also amazing that it had a huge undertaking to have that access of all of the closed captions for all of the plays, just really incredible. Anyway, but we were going through the script and I was realizing that even though the way that I approach, stage directions and, the visuals and the text and all this stuff, even though it's really, I had never considered it to be venue-based, I did realize that for a lot of the sort of devices and forms that are in Frozen Fluid, just in terms of voiceovers, in terms of overlapping dialogue, in terms of, I have a lot of like repetitious sort of, it comes from my background and interest in like experimental noise music. So a lot of the text in the play kind of like goes into that realm in terms of what's being spoken. But I did realize that all of those things in my mind, when I'm putting them down on the page, is like, oh yeah, no, they're going to be in a room and you're going to see a body and there's a speaker, right? And there, you have all this stuff, right? And so it really was sort of a game changer for me in terms of looking at, okay, so in the play, when I am doing these sort of, experimental or interesting, non-conventional things theatrically, this is where my dramaturg brain comes out. It's like, what am I actually trying to achieve here? What devices of the venue-based theater am I engaging? What are those things? And then I think Rowan in the virtual directing workshop too talked about like, yes, there's limitations, but there's also opportunities in the virtual theater, right? So trying to look at the dramaturgy of the piece and figuring out, okay, what is the affect? What is the intended like impact of what I'm trying to do in this moment? And what are the devices in a virtual based performance that we have that could achieve the same thing, right? So it's just a translation into a different medium, and Padra is brilliant, not only in their understanding of the piece, but they also have an interest in, sound design and in, working in, sort of like alternative media. And so I think that they are doing some really cool things in looking at like, okay, how do I augment this moment with these new tools, right? And it's just an experiment for everyone. So, I think I'm learning so much about my own writing by being forced to look at how I have relied on, even inside of a non-traditional piece, how I rely so much on the conventional devices and tools of a venue-based stage. And yeah, I'm really learning a lot about myself and really looking at, working in a virtual environment as an opportunity to expand on everything.
I think it's one of the biggest silver linings of this time is that we are finding new ways to get our stories told. And so I think, embracing that has been key instead of fighting it. I'm going to say that for Occupy the Stage, we are treating this play as a reading. So we're not doing any kinds of bells and whistles, attaching them to, it's going to be a reading of the play. Judy Dove, who I've only just met through this process, is directing it, and I'm going to trust her very capable hands to just lift the words off the page with my incredible actors. I do want to say though that for the Fringe this summer, with what I did, I had this idea to take the short play Empress Melee Lotus Blossom and rewrite it for Zoom so that it formally took place in a restaurant, and I just made it take place on a Zoom call. And it was really interesting to do that because I just felt like instead of fighting it, let me just go with it. And I've been very happy with how it's turned out. Subsequently, I know we're not into the part of your questions where we talk about new projects, but I will expand on it later. But I just want to say that so that play has been now done 3 different places through 3 different theaters on Zoom, because I think Zoom theater is popular because we can reach more people, and we can all do this. And the Greater Boston Stage Company commissioned me to expand it, and so now it exists in 3 parts and a prologue, all imagined to be happening on screens. so that it can be done that way. But I'll talk about that later when you ask me that question.
Oh no, the spoilers for what happens later. So, okay, wow, a lot to kind of volley off of, because again, such wonderful answers. Y'all have been some of my best guests on here. Like, anyways, I'm trying to like contain the inner fangirl. I don't know if anyone else in the audience is, but like this whole time I've just been internally screaming. I wanted to share that sentiment with you all. So what venue-based theater, we as Women's Theater Festival, we all kind of sat down and said, okay, we're doing a thing, right? We're doing things on internet and using technology. We need terms so that people know what in the world are we talking about when we are trying to bring collaborators on. So venue-based theater was one of those phrases that we came up with to kind of say that you don't need space, like that traditional idea of space, in order to make work. Like venue-based theater, throw it out the window. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's fine. We're gonna do virtual based. So I too am in love with that phrase, is what I wanted to just kind of. Nope, the word's gone. Have you ever spoken a sentence and as the words leave your mouth, you feel your thought start to disintegrate?
All the time.
Yes.
All the time.
Perfect. Then,
Yeah, and on Zoom too, it's hard because I know everyone's like looking at you.
Right.
What are they gonna
Exactly. And you're looking
say?
at yourself too. Yeah.
yes. So thank you so much for your understanding and knowing. I promise there was an end to that sentence when I began. I promise there was, and now it's gone.
Slap a
let's-
period on it.
Dot. To be continued.
Ellipses. We'll circle
Right.
back to it later. It's fine.
Right.
It's totally fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut to the next question since clearly Keyanna is struggling over here. We talked about this adaptation for your pieces onto the virtual stage, but what about the adaptation of our industry onto the virtual stage? I think as we experiment more with it and we learn more of the capabilities, both pros and cons, of virtual theater, there's been some unforeseen obstacles, at least on my experiences. So I'm just going to open up the general question and ask, what do we think about that?
Want to see wait, now I can't even think. Venue-based theaters go away. I never want to see them go away. I want to be in the room with everyone and have that ephemeral, unique experience of seeing a story with each other and telling the story with each other. And we will get back there. I think what has happened, though, as I've said before, is that we've found new ways, and so I'm hopeful that we can just add them to our whole view of how we can tell stories. So, like I mentioned before, I think a lot of people are doing radio plays, which is awesome. And when they're well done, they just totally transport you and your imagination fills in all the blanks. And it's really, really fun. This kind of doing Zoom things where, like I mentioned before, you can reach people all over the world. One of my actors actually in Occupy the Stage is in Singapore right now. So when I contacted him, he was in New York, and I said, so, would you do this? And he said, yeah, I'd love to. I just need to let you know I'm going to be in Singapore. So there's a 12-hour time difference, but he can be there, and he wanted to be there. I said, okay, if you're willing to be, 12 hours ahead or behind, I think they're ahead, then come on. So that's a really cool thing that we can. I don't know if Fly, if your people are all in the same area, or are they different places?
I think they're all in the United States, but I think we're spanning from coast to coast. So I think we've got someone in the Pacific Northwest, we've got someone in New York, 2 folks in New York, I think, and then so we're all over the place too. So
that's really cool, right?
Yeah. I think, and I think too, expanding the access to the audience as well, right? Something that you said. And I think that, it's so hard. I know that we all are, really missing the venue-based environment, and there are people who are finding ways to, make work there now and having to adapt, right? And I do think that, as I said before, I think that finding opportunities and adapting and like coming up with new creative solutions, inside of these limitations and constraints is actually really, really good for the industry in all practices, right? And to have folks who are working in the theater I think it's just another oscillation on like, okay, so here's all the proven conventional ways that we know that we can do this. I'm really excited to see how all of the virtual explorations will factor back in to what people are doing in venue-based theater. I also think, something that's happened in this time, of being in, the new normal. I hate that phrase. There's just no other phrase. it's really forcing a lot of artists, a lot of institutions, producers, the industry in both academia and in the commercial, parts of the field to there's a great reckoning. I think that you said this, Christine, right? In looking at how our systems are functioning and really dysfunctioning, right? And so I think that's something really incredible that's coming out of this time is, I could, spout off any number of stories of, a lot of issues that have come to a head in the last few months, right? And I think it's really in both the ways that aesthetically we're being forced to adapt and evolve so we can survive. I think that systematically a lot of things are coming out in the wash, and I think it's in a really good way. So I think that when we come out of the other side of this, everything's going to be brand new, and it's really necessary. So
I like to view this time that we're currently living in as an opportunity for us to reflect on the current system we are working in and the industry and how it has been set up for a lot of us to fail. And what does that look like and how can we change that? And I have encountered a couple of self-described theater purists who are not pro virtual theater. They don't necessarily believe what we are doing is considered live theater. And I want to address all the haters out there. I think theater, well, this isn't even an I think, this is a declarative sentence. Theater has always been adaptive and transformative and has never been rigid in its rules. I mean, of course, you have all the great Greek philosophers who try to define drama, but storytelling has always evolved and has always reflected the times that the storytelling is happening in. So all these people who are trying to stick with venue-based theater, all the traditional definitions of what this very patriarchal system needs to look like, I would challenge you to go back to theater's origins and remember none of this looks like what it used to. So let's keep evolving it and let's keep being flexible and adaptive because that's what theater really is. And I think both of our wonderful playwrights, both Fly and Christine, are living proof of this, of you are adaptive and you don't see what you want to see on stage. Well, then I'm going to curse. Well, then fuck it. I'm going to write it myself. I feel like I'm on the soapbox a lot recently with some of my peers and colleagues. But also, I'll keep saying it until the cows come home because it's really important. And I think, like Christine said, if venue-based theater doesn't come back, I will not be heartbroken.
Oh, I didn't say that. I will be heartbroken. I will be heartbroken.
Then I retract my statement.
Yeah. I'm just saying what I want to just add on, Keyanna, is that I just feel like we need to look at every challenge for the lessons that we can learn from it and the opportunities that might be in there. So I think there's room to expand what our understanding of how we can tell stories and how we can get those stories out there.
Christine Toy Johnson coming in to save me yet again. Thank you. So we are going to start winding down a little bit. So now is the moment we've all been waiting for. Fly, Christine, are there any projects or works that you would like to give a special shout out to?
Well, I'll go.
Go ahead. No. Since
okay.
I already gave a spoiler alert, I was going to say Fly. Why don't you take it?
Sure. So let's see. Besides this amazing festival that's coming up, in really a short amount of time. 2 weeks? Are we at 2 weeks? 1 week?
Yeah. I think it's a week from Friday.
Friday.
Yeah.
Frozen Fluid is also going to have another reading based in Tucson at the Scoundrel and Scamp Theater, which I'm excited about. I worked with that theater in a venue-based performance back when I lived in Arizona. And so I'm really excited to be able to have the opportunity to work with them again, which I would not have had if we weren't doing everything virtual, right? And so it's really great to be able to be hopping back and forth between the coasts there. And I also just want to give a shout out to the Great Plains Theater Commons, which was previously the Great Plains Theater Conference, but they have expanded their programming to be a year-round program supporting playwrights and new play development in the Great Plains region. And I just this month am starting my residency. I'm in a cohort of 5 with that. And so for the next 2 years, we're going to be working on, developing new work in the region. So if you see Frozen Fluid and you're like, wow, what's this weirdo play coming out of Nebraska? There's going to be more.
So as I alluded to, or just said earlier, Empress Meili Lotus Blossom Parts 2 and 3, entitled Battle of the Meilis and I Love You, Happy New Year. They are going to be done with the Greater Boston Stage Company the weekend of November 20th, online, of course. And so I just wrote those parts in the last month, and I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited. They came to me. So what happened was they did the version that people who saw it in the Fringe saw in, I think it was late September, and the pretty much the minute it was over, they said, "Hey, we want to talk to you. A lot of people are saying we want to know what happens next. How do you feel about writing the sequel or continuation of the story?" And then we committed to a date in November. So it was like, yes, I can do it. So I wrote it rather quickly, but I had also been imagining what happened to our friends in that story. And so that's happening November 20th, Greater Boston Stage Company. It'll be, I think, for 5 days. There will be a live stream on the 20th, and then it will be available for the next 4 days after that. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, I'm so excited for everything that's happening now. More work coming from these two. I can't wait. But in the meantime, Occupy the Stage by Women's Theater Festival, happening November 6th through the 8th. So all of that information is on their website, on their Facebook. The link to get the tickets, all of that information is actually in the description on this video. So just scroll a little bit lower below our faces, and all that information's already out there for you. A kind reminder to everyone to go vote. I know it's different for every state. In North Carolina, we still have early voting, I believe, going on. I think, or maybe yesterday was the last day. I can't remember because I already voted. But make sure you do it. Yep. Go vote. November 3rd is the election day. So if you wait till the big finale, you're more than welcome to. Just do it. Also, make sure that you are subscribed, like this video, and click that cute little bell so you know the next time we are going live with our next interview. All the social media for Theater's Not Dead and for Women's Theater Festival, again, in the description. Just scroll just a wee bit and it's going to be right there. I have enjoyed so much this conversation with 2 of the featured playwrights on Occupy the Stage, Fly Jamerson, Christine Toy Johnson. I didn't submit anything to Occupy because I was too big of a scaredy cat, so I have so much admiration for these 2 individuals. Thank you for being on the show. I am Keyanna Alexander, telling everybody, hey y'all, guess what? Theater's not dead. We'll see you next time.